Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Well, that is Isaiah 43 verses 18 and 19. I am your host, Sandra Flach. Happy New Year, January 2026. Can you believe it? Goodness, where did 2025 go? I don't even know. Grateful to have you here on the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast. I am always here with a new episode every Monday to encourage you and equip you for your parenting journey. I am on this journey with you as always because I too am an adoptive mom. I have 8 children. 5 through adoption, so all have experienced some level of trauma, and our youngest 2 are diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, and they are currently 20 and 22 years old. So I know the challenges we navigate while raising children from hard places, and my hope is that you will find this podcast an invaluable resource. This week, we are kicking off our nutrition series with Dr. Jerrod Brown. Jerrod will be presenting with slides. So if you would like to see the slides and see the presentation, you can watch this podcast on YouTube at the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel. All of our podcast episodes in the video form are there. So you have to go to the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel. And we're excited because we're going to be talking nutrition with Dr. Brown all month long from the various perspectives of nutrition as it applies to trauma, FASD, ADHD, and autism. So each week we will zero in on one of those. And today we are going to be doing nutrition and trauma. But before we bring on Dr. Brown, I have some other announcements to share with you. My new devotional book, Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms, is now available on Amazon. And this month, you have a chance to win a free signed copy. This is just for podcast listeners. So all you need to do to register for a chance to win is go down to the show notes, which you would be able to see on your phone, and go to the show notes, and you will see a link. It'll be clearly marked, and it will take you to a page where you will simply put in your name, your email address so that we can contact you if you win, and your mailing address. So if you win, we can send you your book. We're not going to spam you with a whole bunch of stuff. Just be able to pull names. And we're going to be collecting, people can register. We're going to be collecting entries all January long. And at the end of January, we will announce the winners. I believe we're going to pick 2 winners. So you have 2 shots to win, and you can enter all month long. So make sure that you go to the show notes and do that. I'm super excited about that. And be sure to check out our website so you can learn about all of the resources that we have for you here at the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast. I write a blog every month. There's our online and in-person FASD workshops listed that you can register for. You can find out more and even sign up to be part of the Hope for the FASD Journey online support group. And of course, we also have on our website all of our special episodes with Dr. Jerrod Brown, so you can easily find them. Are all on the website as well, and other resources too. So you want to check those out. You have to go to justicefororphansny.org, which is the organization I founded about 14 years ago. And all of the adoption and foster care journey resources and things are under the umbrella of JFO. So you have to go to the JFO website, but it's clearly marked. You just click Adoption and Foster Care Journey, and you will find all of the things that you would be interested in looking for. Speaking of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, please follow and like our social media pages. We are on Facebook as the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, and we are on Instagram at AFC_journey. So we're trying to build up those pages so we really can connect with you there. So make sure you do that. And gosh, it's 2026. So my speaking calendar is about to, begin, and I would love to connect with you in person. So I am booking more opportunities for 2026, but right now, as it stands, I will be at the Filled Retreat. That's the Jamie Finn's Foster the Family. The Filled Retreat for foster and adoptive moms is January 30th through February 1st in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I will be there leading a breakout session and having a booth. And my books will be there, and I'll be able to connect with you there. And then on February 21st, which is a Saturday, I will be at the church at Brook Hills in Birmingham, Alabama, where I'll be speaking, presenting on FASD for, a day. I could say a day long, but it's not the whole day. It's like a 4-hour presentation on FASD and some other things. So I'll be there. And then I will be at Mobilize, Ohio on March 21st, and that is at the North Canton Chapel. I will be leading 3 breakout sessions there, and I'll have a table and my books. And the Renew Retreat for foster and adoptive parents in Swansboro, North Carolina on April 30th through May 2nd. And I will be there leading an FASD workshop as well as a workshop on prayer, praying for our kids. And that is with my friend, a fellow adopted mom, Terry Froman. So lots of opportunities to connect. This is just my schedule through May 2nd. And of course, I have more coming up in the fall. So I'd love to connect with you. So if you're at any of these events, stop by my table and see me, come to the workshop. We can take a selfie. Always love to connect with you. And if you're interested in having me come to speak at your group, if you have a group of foster and adoptive parents at your church or another agency that you are with, if you are doing a retreat for foster and adoptive moms or even just moms in general, reach out to me, email me. My email address is in the show notes. I would love to be able to come to you. I also do online trainings too and workshops. So if it's something where you're looking for a training for your group and you want to just do it virtually, I do that too. So look for those links in the show notes, and I hope to see you at some of those events. Now, today, I'm super excited to begin this series on nutrition with Dr. Jerrod Brown. He is our favorite doctor here on the show, and he's going to unpack this topic of nutrition as it really pertains to us and our kids and their unique needs. So this is going to be the first of 4 episodes looking at nutrition. Again, today we're going to focus on nutrition and trauma. So if you want to know a little bit more about Dr. Brown, if you're not familiar with him, his short bio is he has 5 PhDs and specializes in topics related to autism, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, confabulation, suggestibility, trauma and other life adversities, alexithymia, and executive dysfunction, recidivism, traumatic brain injury, and youth fire setting, and like all of the things. So you can check out his full bio, which will be in the show notes if you want to read all of it, because it's quite extensive, because he is just, he's a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and experience, and also is as a foster adoptive parent. So we can learn so much from him. We always do. And we've done several episodes with him. So make sure you go to our website and be able to check out all of those. So right now, let's get to the show. Please welcome Dr. Jerrod Brown. Welcome back, Dr. Brown. Super excited to dive into this series with you.
I am too, Sandra. Thank you for having me back. I think we're going to have some fun with this series, but we're also, hopefully it's going to be very eye-opening as well, because I think when we talk about food, we're all interested, as you mentioned before we jumped on here today too, with the holidays coming up, or even probably when you're listening to this, it's already passed. we probably are all guilty of a little overeating, but we're going to talk about all this stuff within the context of working with kids and loving kids, supporting kids with a variety of different challenges. And I know this is a 4-part series, correct me if I'm wrong, and we're doing today's in trauma and attachment. We have one on FASD, one on autism, and one on ADHD. So you're definitely, if you listen to all 4 of these, you are going to hear some common themes that emerge. But I'm hoping what we talk about is not just going to help the kids we love and serve, but it's also going to help the entire family system. And again, what we're talking about today too, don't take it as medical advice. Talk to your doctor, talk to your nutritionist. But I want to point out a bunch of things the research literature says about nutrition and food and dietary patterns among children with histories of trauma and complex neurodevelopmental disorders.
Absolutely. And it's such a relevant topic. And I know over all of the episodes that we've done together, you do bring up that nutrition is something that we need to be paying attention to. So we're going to dive deep into it now. And so I greatly appreciate it. I will remind our listeners again that you are sharing your screen. So you've got some fabulous slides that go along with this presentation. So if you want to see the slides, you can always go check them out on our YouTube channel at the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel. So with that, I'm just going to hand it over to you, Dr. Brown, to begin.
You bet. So everyone, if you're looking at this visually, you'll see my email here. If you have questions, reach out. I love when folks reach out. Glad to try to answer some general questions for you. And I know some of you might be listening to this in audio, but here's a copy of my professional biography. Just want folks to know where I come from. I have a doctorate degree. I have 6 different master's degrees. One of my master's degrees is in applied clinical nutrition. I do have a graduate certificate in applied pediatric nutrition as well. And again, I'm not a licensed nutritionist, but I have these degrees and I do have some certifications as well. So what we're talking about today is for general education purposes. And most of my work focuses around the topic of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, autism, and other neurodevelopmental disorders. And that's one of the reasons why I went back to school to get another degree in nutrition, because that topic just comes up so often. I've heard enough stories and I'm very familiar with this research literature. I do believe that's an important piece of the puzzle. It's not the only piece, but it is a big piece that we need to be aware of, is what kind of food that child or teenager is consuming. And if you're seeing this visually, these are some of my certifications. I do have a certification in functional nutrition. Again, certifications are different than licensures. Talk to a licensed nutritionist or a registered dietitian if you're looking for very specific advice. So what we're talking about today is trauma and other life adversities within the context of diet and food and feeding practices. And if you look at this research literature as a whole, it's pretty clear that kids that have had a lot of prenatal or early childhood trauma and attachment problems oftentimes have kind of a problematic relationship with food. Again, it's not going to be 100%. I'm sure you could find plenty of kids too that have these histories that probably eat well, but in my experience, a lot of these kids don't eat good food, or they may have feeding problems too, where maybe they want to eat good food, but there's something going on with their muscles or their brain that's preventing swallowing and things of that nature. So visually here, and I'll be mindful too, because not everyone's going to see this visually on YouTube, but if you are raising a child that has extensive trauma in their history from multiple sources, the right term you'd probably want to be aware of is complex or developmental trauma. And when kids have a ton of trauma that happened to them early on in life and in utero, without proper support, love, interventions, a lot of times these kids, unfortunately, throw up and get a diagnosis of ADHD. They may have higher rates of eating disorders. They may have more anxiety problems. And the list goes on and on and on. As you can see here visually, this is kind of what some of the research says that we want to be aware of and why it's so important to take into account complex trauma histories. When a child you're raising, and let's pretend you're a foster parent, adoptive parent, and that child that you love so much was placed with you, and they came from some really difficult situations. Every child is different, of course. I want to be mindful of that. But if that child's had a ton of trauma, fractured attachment patterns, if you add into the equation where they're exposed to drugs or alcohol in utero, a lot of times children that come from these complex backgrounds, as they get a little older, may be dealing with higher levels of guilt and shame. They may be dealing with more anxiety, more sleep issues. They may handle emotions not the best, and they can sometimes fly out the handle. Why do you want to be aware of these things? Because a lot of times these things often co-occur with problematic eating patterns. I've seen it many times in direct cases I've been involved with where maybe that person doesn't have an off button and they just eat and eat and eat. They may crave tons of junk food, sugar sweetened beverages. Why do you want to care about that? Well, if somebody's consuming that kind of food and tons of sugar, processed foods, things of that nature, and they're already dealing with a lot of challenges neurologically, behaviorally, emotionally, the food they eat that's not that good for them can absolutely exacerbate anxiety, depression, anger control problems, sleep issues, and the list goes on and on and on. Visually here, and I'll speak out loud to this, and then Sandra, I'll park the brakes, see what you think. Why do we want to care about this topic too? Not just after the child is born, but what mom is consuming during pregnancy. That's very, very important to take into account as well. We all know the importance of understanding prenatal drug and alcohol exposure, but what happens if that birth mom during pregnancy was malnourished or only consuming junk food throughout her pregnancy? You will find plenty of research that talks about during the pregnancy process, lots of nutritional problems, deficiencies could play a role in neural tube disorders, developmental delay, and it can impact all kinds of other brain and body functioning of that child in utero. So then after that child's born, that in and of itself could set that child up for more struggles throughout life. And every child is different, every situation's different, but it's so important to understand what we eat and what we don't eat, how much we eat, and the lack thereof. So, Sandra, I'll stop there. I know you'll have plenty of insights too, so please.
Yeah, just a couple things, and I think it just reaffirms a lot of what I've learned and so many of us have learned. And it's our kids come with multiple diagnoses, right? Overlapping things. I always call it the alphabet soup, right? They've got, maybe they have the diagnosis of ADHD, ASD, PTSD, the FASD, and the ODD, the RAD, all of those things. And obviously nutrition, prenatally, and then of course what they're eating now, like you said, can exacerbate if it's a poor diet, processed foods, a lot of sugar and that kind of thing. It can exacerbate the symptoms of those conditions that we're already, struggling with, in parenting our kids. We love them, but the behaviors are big and they're hard. And, we're trying to figure out what to do. And maybe we don't necessarily think about nutrition at first, but you're showing us that, nutrition plays a vital role in what's going on.
And you brought up a good point that I'll add to is problematic eating patterns or the lack thereof can exacerbate things. But what are some things that can calm these kind of behavioral problems down? Food can calm it down if we're eating the right foods in a lot of cases, if we're getting better sleep, if we're fixing the gut, if we're exercising. So it can exacerbate it when we're not doing what we need to do, and it can maybe help calm it down, get our blood sugars better, fix our gut microbiome, bring our inflammation down, which is good for our brain and body. Other things to consider, and I wanted to point this out. This is from an interesting study from a few years ago, and I've given a lot of talks on this, and I always try to show this slide. Another reason why we want to care about prenatal nutrition or prenatal malnutrition. There's some studies that have found a child who is exposed to malnutrition early on in life, that in and of itself, in some cases, could place that child at greater risk after they're born and they get older to maybe develop more addictive behavioral patterns later on in life, which makes sense because if that child's not getting the proper vitamins and minerals in utero, their brain is not developing properly. So that after the child's born, there's a lot of things we can do to make it better. But in some cases, that child may have even more impulse control issues, more executive function impairments, more abstract reasoning deficits, and the list goes on. If you are working in the child welfare arena, if you are a parent to a child in foster care, if you are an adoptive parent and you know that child's come out of a lot of not so good situations, plenty of studies point to the fact that children with extensive histories of child maltreatment and early attachment pattern issues are way more likely to have problematic eating and food related behaviors. It's not going to be 100%, but you might see more hoarding issues around food, excessive eating. I've seen this in cases where, again, there doesn't seem like there's an off button and that child just eats and eats and eats. What happens? Child gets older. Most of the time, they're going to be probably overweight. Then that sets them up for greater risk for maybe diabetes, metabolic syndrome as they get older. Very important as part of a holistic intervention plan to get a nutritionist dietitian on the team as well. Very important, I think. Plenty of studies. We could do a talk just on this about what the foster care research literature says, but there's a lot of studies that talk about children who are living outside of their birth parents' home, that maybe it's termination of parental rights or all of these things. Plenty of research says lots of dietary concerns among children in foster care and children in residential settings and in adoptive homes. So a call to action. I think the child welfare arena adoption specialist should at least have a basic training on nutrition as it relates to the good work they do. Why do we want to care about youth in foster care as they get older? Well, we know we want to care about every child, but children who've come out of foster care, maybe they're still in foster care right now and they've been in multiple placements. As a whole, the research says without proper support interventions as they get older, more problematic health outcomes are common. You will find research that says higher rates of asthma, higher rates of heart disease as the person gets older. It may increase risk of diabetes, and the list goes on. And part of the reasons for this, obviously, is trauma, fractured attachment patterns. But as that child gets older, are they living an unhealthy lifestyle with food and they're smoking cigarettes maybe, or consuming tons of energy drinks, lots of screen time exposure. They're not getting good sleep. In a nutshell, there's a lot of research literature. So visually here, and I'll talk through this if you don't see this visually. But if you look at the research literature related to children in foster care in relation to problematic eating and food-related behaviors, what does it say in a nutshell? We need to be aware higher rates of food insecurity. We need to understand the adverse childhood experiences research. We need to be aware of higher levels of poverty, neglect, emotional dysregulation. Sometimes there's anxiety coping where that person has learned how to cope with anxiety through stress eating. And if you have a child too that has a ton of behavioral problems, they're hyperactive. Has anyone ever screened them for dietary concerns? vitamin and mineral deficiencies, blood sugar issues, even constipation or gut health issues. Definitely in an ideal world, every child that has disruptive behavioral patterns, we would rule out sleep issues, gut issues, blood sugar problems, because that could be a big missing piece of the puzzle. The last thing we want to do is label a child with conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, ADHD, when maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe they have both going on, but we need to dig deeper. Other things, just to visually break it down here, another great article that just makes it very clear. Children who have a history of being in foster care typically have higher levels of eating disorders, hoarding food, maybe stealing food, and obesity. There's a lot of reasons for this. It's very complex. But what are some of the big drivers here? Probably fractured attachment patterns, trauma histories, executive dysfunction. Very important to be aware of these early on. And if you notice, as a foster care parent, adoptive parent, you see these patterns emerging. Early intervention is so important because if these things go on and on and on, as that child becomes a teenager and an adult, these things can have a cumulative effect on the brain and body, and that child may have more health problems on top of some of the other things they're already dealing with. Equally important is to really understand food insecurity. A lot of times we think about food insecurity after birth, but it's so important to consider prenatal food insecurity exposure. And Sandra, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we did an episode on food insecurity and an episode on the first 1,000 days of life,
Yes,
standalone, if I remember right.
yes,
The
we did.
first,
We've done two.
yeah, check those out. We'll go way deeper in the weeds, but that first 1,000 days of life is day one of conception all the way up to age 2. So very important to understand that. If we look at this through an adverse childhood experiences lens, if a child grew up in a home and there was food insecurity at play, that's an adverse childhood experience in and of itself. I think a lot of times we think the ACEs research really only applies to like abuse, maltreatment, neglect. Well, we also need to be aware of food insecurity because that is a form of trauma that is very scary for that entire family system. Sandra, I'll park the brakes there. I know you probably have some more wonderful thoughts, comments.
Yeah, I'm just, I always learn so much from you, Dr. Brown, and it just makes me think about how how much of this is I mean, it's all so relevant to our kids. I know the parents and caregivers that are listening, I'm sure the light bulb is going off for you as it is for me because there's so many things from just a couple things I jotted down. I just think of food is used so many times as a reward or as, whether it's parents or somebody else bribing, I mean, I think of kids going to, school or Sunday school and the treat or the snack is, Munchkin donuts or cookies or, sugary juice or whatever it might be. Definitely not going to help our kids, to be able to regulate. It's going to make things worse. I think of even maybe you gave us this example when you spoke the last time to our support group, but in a group home setting where kids are rewarded for good behavior by going for a walk to the local convenience store to get the Slurpee or the brightly colored high sugar beverage, right, as a reward. And it's like the worst thing that we can do. And just I think being aware of it, being aware of how important nutrition is and not using food in that way, I think is super important. And the other thing that came to mind, and I had never made this connection before, is one of my kiddos that came to me through a kinship placement. She came to us with chronic constipation problems and really struggled with that for a long time. And we tried to make sure, work on her diet and stuff, but she's in her 30s now. And she recently told me that she's seeing her doctor because she still has a problem with that. And I know there's trauma history for her before she came to us. And then I also know there was probably some prenatal exposure. So it's so relevant. And sometimes we don't even connect all the dots. So I so appreciate you for connecting those dots for us.
Sandra, thank you. Definitely. And glad you brought up constipation. I'm doing a lot of work in that area, giving more talks on that. And don't brush that aside, folks. Constipation's a real issue. And look into that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And one of the things is what we eat, our trauma histories, our attachment patterns. Look to the autonomic nervous system. Look to the HPA axis as well when we're studying constipation on a neurobiological level. So that's a whole nother talk for another day, but back to what we're talking about today. This slide here, and I just want to verbally talk about it. You'll find plenty of articles too that really talk about the importance of being aware that there's a number of foster care families around the country who are dealing with food insecurity. So we need to be aware of that and support these families. Why do you want to care about food insecurity? This is for all of us, but food insecurity has been linked with more academic problems, more hospitalizations, more brain-based problems, higher levels of asthma, more emotional issues, and it can stunt social skill development. So this is a big deal in and of itself, and you start adding on prenatal exposure to various things, it gets even more important. What are the major characteristics, according to research, if we looked at individuals who are truly food insecure? Well, typically they're not going to eat healthy food. They may have plenty of calories in a day, but are they getting those calories from the gas station? Fast food joints. Meal skipping is very common. Why do you want to care about meal skipping? Blood sugar imbalances, not getting the proper vitamins and nutrients. Having a very unbalanced diet is very common, and having lack of food choice. So maybe that person has a lot of calories, but the only calories they're getting is from noodles and other kinds of pasta, and they're just eating the same food over and over and over again. What's going to happen? Probably constipation, sleep issues, depression, anxiety, the list goes on. When a child lives in a household that would be classified as food insecure, the research says that child may have more behavioral problems. They may be more likely not to get exercise, and it really impacts their overall academic, physical, and mental health, to name a few. As children start exiting the foster care system, it's very sad what the research says, and every child is different. But if that child was in the foster care system for a long period of time and never placed with a permanent home and they were bouncing around from placement to placement, there's a lot of things we need to be aware of. As that child becomes an adult and they don't have the right supports in place, homelessness goes up, employment problems, mental illness, food insecurity, the list goes on. Early intervention is so important. And we need to be aware too, it's not just the food, but there's so many layers to this we have to be aware of. Unfortunately, mental health conditions are much more common among children in the foster care arena. So if you have a child that's been in and out of foster care, higher rates of ADHD have been reported, anxiety, depression, ODD, sometimes conduct disorder, sometimes post-traumatic stress disorder, and sometimes reactive attachment disorder. Why do I talk about these mental health conditions? Well, in a lot of cases, when you have more mental health challenges, we also have more feeding and eating problems on top of that. And I also just want to remind us that eating disorders may be more common. So we need to be aware that working with a provider who truly understands the complexities of eating disorders, not just poor eating practices, but a full-blown eating disorder really needs to be taken serious, diagnosed and treated, because these things can lead to a host of issues. So some of the eating disorders that may be more common among people with long histories of food insecurity, binge eating disorders, there's dysfunctional eating symptoms you might see, bulimia, there may be a complete loss of control with eating. There's a case I consulted on a while ago. I'll never forget this case. The person just ate and ate and ate and ate and dealt with so many chronic health conditions. And there was clearly something in the brain that probably got programmed incorrectly in utero. And there was no off button in the brain. The brain didn't tell the stomach, stop eating. This person would eat and eat and eat and not ever know they're full. And also often would just throw up all their food a little while later because they didn't realize how much they truly ate. So a lot of stuff to think about. And I do want to be aware that when we're talking about all this trauma, and we're looking at this through a foster care lens right now, and the person isn't eating good. There's tons of trauma. There's attachment problems. They're not getting good sleep. You want to be aware of the term allostatic load. That is wear and tear on the body. It's another reason why we want to be aware of all of these health outcomes. Because if we deal with a high level of allostatic load, that just ages our body way too quickly. And if you break down allostatic load, the research says wear and tear on the body, it's a physiological kind of dysregulation going on in the body. It can manifest as HPA axis dysfunction, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which then leads to more cortisol issues, which that's a big component of not getting good sleep. And then this can also lead to more neurological problems, autonomic nervous system dysfunction, metabolic syndrome, and problems with our immune system. If you get deep in the weeds with this is why a lot of these kids, as they get older, have more health problems. The more you can understand these things and target them with intervention, it's going to help with behavioral and physical health issues. And there's a lot of factors associated with allostatic load: stigma, marginalization, racism, oppression, untreated depression and anxiety that goes on and on year after year. Lots of self-esteem issues, smoking cigarettes, binge drinking, binge eating, drugs, isolation, and there's many more. But these are things that just make our body not do what it's supposed to do. And we're talking about trauma today, folks, too, obviously. So it's very, very important to understand in some kids and teenagers with these histories, you might see more trauma response eating patterns. That could be rapid eating, where that child just go, 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 go nonstop. Maybe there's a loss of appetite. That could be a factor too, where they just don't have an appetite. You might see more food hoarding, where that child maybe grew up in poverty and homelessness. They come place to you, and they probably in their mind are programmed, we're not going to have enough food. So they sneak food from the dinner table. Maybe you find a ton of food stored in their room. This is real stuff, folks. And again, I want to remind us, as children exit the foster care system without proper supports and services in place, more problematic health outcomes. Sandra, I'll stop there before we move to our next section.
Yes, and I have a couple thoughts right after this.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond, invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets Neurobehavioral Model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
Yes, this is great, Dr. Brown. Everything that you're saying, it's just, it resonates with me, and I'm sure it does with our listeners, because we have so many, so much of this describes our kids, I think. And, and I know you've mentioned a couple of times the outcomes for kids in foster care who don't get permanency. But I know, for our kids who have gotten permanency and even our kids who've been with us for years now, there's still signs of some of this stuff. So just understanding all of the, prenatal, food insecurity and malnutrition and things that have taken place, and then, in their early childhood, just how deeply ingrained it affects everything. And I think that's eye-opening because we don't always think of nutrition, right away. We're thinking about a lot of times we're dealing with these big, difficult behaviors and we're just wanting to fix that. So by really shining the light on all of this, it is so interesting. And it resonates with me, so, yeah, that was one thing, the mental health, issues that increase, when there were, because of early food issues. It makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, we're all in this together. There's a lot going on here. We can't do it alone. So this next section is kind of geared toward the professional, but I think it's important too for caregivers. If you're noticing these patterns, talk to the doctor right away. Get connected with people who understand this. Obviously, we know the importance of supporting early childhood development, but there's a million factors that can threaten it as well. And the very nature of coming out of one home environment to another can be a really positive thing, but it is still a trauma and an attachment issue. So think about all the things that can impact early childhood development: attachment, trauma, neglect, what we eat, what we don't eat, violence exposure, even exposure to environmental toxins and contaminants. When we study these topics, I think it's very important to also be aware of health disparities. For some children and families, they may be dealing with higher levels of health disparities. What are health disparities? Well, lower socioeconomic status, social isolation, discrimination, stigma, racism. We got to take these things serious because this should alert us to probably higher levels of food insecurity, higher levels of isolation from other providers. These families need even more support. When we're looking at this holistically today as well, if you're a professional or your family, just being aware of the topic of economic hardship, there's no shame in this. It's okay to ask for help. I grew up with a single mom, and we had to go to the food shelf sometimes. There's a lot growing up. We had a lot of economic hardship. This puts added stress, added strain on the family. So the more we can support and come around these families that are dealing with true economic hardship, that's a piece of this puzzle as well. Metacognition is a big topic to be aware of. Most of your kids who have a diagnosis of like ADHD, autism, FASD, IDD are going to have metacognitive impairments. Why do I talk about metacognition today in the context of feeding and eating? Because if your child or teenager has metacognitive impairments, the research says that in and of itself could be a piece of the puzzle that contributes to impulse control eating, problematic relationships with food. So working with a provider who truly understands this and targeting it with very practical interventions to help that child learn more metacognitive skills. Metacognition is thinking about thinking and knowing about knowing. Low self-control is a common issue for kids with neurodevelopmental disorders, trauma histories, attachment patterns. If that child has very low levels of self-control, the research says that can be a driver for unhealthy eating habits. Lower intakes of fruit and vegetables, higher consumptions of fast food, higher consumptions of sugar-sweetened beverages. If you have a child who has extreme hyperactivity symptoms, could that be related to diet? Definitely in some cases. Could it be related to not getting good sleep, excessive screen time exposure, blood sugar imbalances, sedentary behaviors, untreated sleep apnea? Yes, yes, yes to all of those. So hyperactivity is a fascinating topic, and it's a big topic that comes up in the consultation work I do. Holistically dig deep. What are the drivers for hyperactivity? Well, look at the food too. Why do we want to care about hyperactivity, low self-control, impulse control issues, all of these things we're talking about today? Well, unfortunately, for some of these kids, these drivers and many more can contribute to lower levels of self-esteem. If a child or an adolescent has low levels of self-esteem, we're talking about food today. Let's keep it on that. That in and of itself has been linked with more eating problems. So this is another piece of the pie we want to look at. Could that child, teenager, be dealing with low self-esteem? If that child, teenager, or adult doesn't eat good and they have a really poor diet quality, what are some things like maybe that child, teenager would go to a nutritionist or dietitian or a medical doctor? Well, they would probably dig into, could there be a lack of skills in around nutrition? Maybe that family system would do well with some education around these topics and just learning some practical skills about how to cook meals, how to select healthy foods. Maybe there's some planning or time management issues. No shame in working with an in-home family skills worker too, just to learn some of these skills. We all know stress is alive and well in any family, but if you're raising a child with special needs, there's no way around it. Stress is typically probably a little higher. Stress in and of itself has been linked with more problematic eating patterns. Maybe there's higher levels of meal skipping, stress eating, uncontrolled emotional eating, and consuming more like sugar and fast food and things of that nature. Why do we want to learn about stress and chronic stress? Well, chronic stress in a child or an adult has been linked with so many health problems. It's a driver for so many things, including more cravings of problematic foods and blood sugar imbalances, to name a few. There's an episode I did with Sandra on this topic, the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. In an ideal world, if you're working with providers, they should know about this topic. A lot of providers haven't had training in this, but a provider who's open to learning about this, it's a huge piece of this puzzle. So if we're dealing with tons of stress and the person doesn't eat well and has a lot of just problematic eating patterns, their HPA axis is probably off, which then throws off their hormones and it throws off their gut and it throws off their brain. Learning how to calm the HPA axis is so important as well. Maybe the child's in a home and there's not a lot of parental emotional availability in some cases. Maybe the parents are burnt out. Maybe they're working full time. Who knows what it is? Low parental emotional availability could be another piece of this puzzle. And the research does say long-term exposure to low parental emotional availability has been linked with more sleep issues, more self-esteem problems, technology addiction, and the list goes on. Sandra, I'm going to stop there. Let you, add some more thoughts, comments, my friend.
Yeah, I do want to remind our listeners that we have done so many episodes with you on some of these very specific topics. Even I know you mentioned metacognition earlier, executive dysfunction, the HPA access, all of those things. So we have all of those episodes on our website, so you don't have to scroll through the whole catalog of podcasts. You could just go right to our website to get all of our episodes with Dr. Brown. Couple thoughts. One thought. Just thinking about, look, I know with FASD, one of the symptoms can be that younger developmental age, right? Like sometimes we call it dysmaturity. And I see even with my boys that are, say, in their, early 20s, a lot of times developmentally, they're almost half that. So, think of a 12-year-old. A 12-year-old likes their junk food, right? They're not, they need a lot of supervision to help make wise choices. So they're not just eating the sugary things and the junk food and the things that all kids like, right? So, I would assume that that can make it more challenging for, the individual themselves and even, parents and caregivers to really guide these individuals to making healthy choices.
Huge. And I think that's where every state's different, but like in-home skills worker, a coach who can like model and teach these things, and maybe working with a feeding specialist who really understands the complexities of dysmaturity and sensory processing and metacognition, executive function, and doing it over and over again. Because of these kids, all kids are sponges. So what you do as an adult too, and how you model that behavior plays into that as well. So definitely big piece of that puzzle as well.
Yeah, and a funny story last month, my son who's 20, now he loves vegetables and he does not like pizza. We were having company over, some friends, and we decided we were going to order pizza and wings, and my son was like, "I don't want that. I hate pizza." And I took a picture and posted it on my social media because he literally ate two avocados and a few of those small snacking cucumbers and some cherry tomatoes. Like he had a plate full of veggies, and that was wonderful, right? Every parent's dream that their kiddo would prefer that over pizza. However, he does like ramen noodles, which I keep to a very minimum supply in our house because, teaching him how to cook, he can make himself ramen noodles, but he'll want to eat like 3 packages of ramen noodles in a day. And so trying to teach him that is not healthy, and he doesn't seem to get it. So that's the salty, but I know they're terrible. They're, packaged food. Just kind of chime in there a little bit if you can on, those kinds of food choices are not the best for our kids either.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that reminds me that our taste preferences, there's a whole bunch of neuroscience around taste preferences. And in some cases, our taste preferences may have been partially programmed prenatally before we were born. So some people love their sweets. Some people love salty food.
Mhm.
Yes, most people love pizza. This is an unusual situation, but yes, the ramen noodles, well, depends on the kind of ramen noodles. I know like at the co-op they have a little healthier version, but the ramen noodles that I grew up on in college, what were they, like 7 cents a package? I don't think they're food. They're
Exactly.
not food. No, they're not. They're junk, to
Yeah.
be honest with you. But they taste good and they're cheap. So a lot of people like that. So
And I think my son likes the idea that he can make them himself. And he does like all soups. He loves, he's definitely a soup lover. And, but just, so I think it boils down to me finding a healthier version of, something like that. Cause I think it's the little packet of whatever it might be that, goes in to flavor it. That's, I think the most lethal part of it is my understanding. But, um, you know, and don't get me wrong, he does like sweets. So we kind of have to keep an eye on that too. But it's just always, it's never a dull moment in the lives of foster and adoptive parents. And I'm sure I'm getting a lot of head nods out there right now as I say that.
I do want to say, when we think about taste preference, think of neuroplasticity. If we introduce healthy foods over and over and over and over again, we might be able to create some new neural pathways where the taste isn't as aversive over time. For me personally, I'll give you my example. I hated vegetables growing up, even as an adult, but my wife and I changed our diet several years ago. I don't like vegetables now, but they're not aversive to me. At first, they were terribly aversive, but I kept doing it over and over and over again. I think I created new neural pathways where I can tolerate it now.
Mm.
So repetition is key, working with providers, of course. And here visually, again, I think this is a tie-in kind of to the ramen noodles in some cases. When we think about food insecurity, again, what are the specific factors associated with food insecurity? Well, not having enough money, chronic unemployment. Maybe it's living in a neighborhood where you only have access to the gas station and ramen noodles and prepackaged things. So there's a lot of contributors to food insecurity we need to be aware of. These are some questions I just put together for everyone just to be aware of, but these are red flag indicators that you may be or working with a family. They're dealing with food insecurity. This is not to diagnose or anything, but just red flag indicators, reminders, light bulb questions to work with providers. This is kind of what the research says. This is not an all-encompassing list, but these are some questions I've kind of collected and honed over the years.
So just to go back to that slide, if you don't
Yes,
mind.
of course.
So for our listeners who aren't seeing that, so just kind of, can you read off a few of those questions to give them an idea?
History of committing crimes to obtain food. We don't like shoplifting. Having lack of resources to purchase healthy foods. Worrying about not having access to healthy foods. Maybe going to the emergency room when you're not sick because you know you'll get a free meal there. Going to bed hungry. You as a parent, maybe you go all day without eating and you give your share of your food to your kids, which is very honorable, but that's also hurting you. Meal skipping, all of these things, these could be red flag indicators of possible food insecurity.
Yeah, and it makes me think about, if our kids had food insecurity before coming to us, maybe they were in foster care and maybe, there was not a lot of food available, but maybe the one thing that they were able to get access to is, say, the ramen noodles, not to keep picking on ramen noodles, but
Yeah.
that could almost be a comfort when they're in, they come to us and they want the ramen noodles, and then we don't want to give them that because we know it's not healthy and we can offer them so many other healthier options. Their connection to those ramen noodles, it may feel like survival to them. Like, well, I'm not going to survive if I can't have these, because that was their link to survival. So just, you can speak on that, or at least something for
Yeah.
our parents to be aware of.
Yeah, we need to be aware of that. We need to be sensitive. What's the right answer for that? It's tough to say. My opinion says
Yeah.
look at it through a trauma and attachment lens. We don't want to do an all or nothing, because if you take away that food instantly, that could be an extreme setback, an extreme trauma trigger. Maybe it's gentle nudges, introducing healthier foods, healthier options very gently. But in the end, what's most important? The relationship, trust building. Maybe a nutritionist, dietitian would have a different opinion. That's just kind of what my opinion would be on that.
I agree.
When we're talking about children in foster care again, a lot of other layers. Anxiety's higher, sleep issues, but nutrition, what we eat, can calm this down or make it worse depending on what the foods we consume. We've done a lot of talks on different aspects of sleep, I know, Sandra, but a lot of kids in foster care and a lot of kids with just neurodevelopmental disorders and trauma histories in general don't sleep well. When somebody consistently doesn't sleep well, that in and of itself can throw off our hormones and make us want to crave more carby foods, sugary foods, salty foods in some cases. And unfortunately, it is so clear from the research literature on kids with a neurodevelopmental disorder, they also face higher levels of bullying behavior when they get into a K through 12 environment. So if your child, unfortunately, is getting bullied at school, that is another layer that could actually exacerbate sleep-related problems and dietary practices. Sandra, before I move into like tips, strategies, solutions, anything else with that last section you want me to cover?
No, this is great. I definitely want to get to your tips and strategies. So go right in on into that.
If we go over the top of that, I can stay as long as you need me to, so no worries at all.
Okay.
So it's not just me saying this. If you look at this research literature, you're going to find articles that talk about foster care parents and even adoptive parents and all parents would do well learning about the importance of food, taking classes, reading about this, collaborating, consulting with providers who have the proper training credentials in these areas. In the nutrition literature, there are articles that talk about trauma-informed nutrition assistance programming. So in an ideal world, all nutritionists dietitians, medical doctors, mental health providers would be trauma informed. And this is especially the case when providing services to children who've been adopted in the child welfare arena or just have come out of very difficult situations. The first 1,000 days of life research literature, again, planting the seeds. It's so important for all of us to be aware of that because that's the point in a child's life where the most brain development happens. And if we look at the first 1,000 days of life research literature, obviously in a perfect world, children would have a good pregnancy outcomes. Mom would have had a pregnancy free from chemicals, eating healthy, exercise, staying in contact with one's healthcare provider, having the right amount of water, all of those things. Unfortunately, a lot of kids that were placed in foster care in the adoption arenas had some things happen during the first 1,000 days of life that weren't ideal. So what approaches can we use? Well, general approaches, being calm, kind, patient, setting realistic goals. If you're teaching a skill to a child with some of these special needs kind of backgrounds, role playing, making it visually appropriate, working with plenty of providers, having parent training, living a healthy lifestyle as an entire family system. All of these things can be very, very helpful. You've heard me talk about this many times on different podcasts with Sandra, but there's plenty of research that shows having meals together as a family without technology and without interruptions is an intervention in and of itself. And if you look at the benefits of shared family meal times, and if you go through tons and tons of articles, what does it say about the benefits of kids sitting down with caregivers and family and having uninterrupted meals without technology consistently? Those kids are typically happier. Those kids learn communication and listening abilities. It's a great way to promote empathy and perspective taking. Kids that have that consistent meal time, research has found they're less likely to deal with depression and anxiety, or if they do, something pops up, they have better coping skills, their self-esteem is better. So family meal times is an intervention in and of itself. When we think about family meal times, learn about the research too on family cohesion. That's a whole line of research that just talks about if you're working with families or you're a family listening to this, the more we can promote positive family cohesion, what does that mean? Well, we're establishing clear rules and responsibilities. There is healthy boundaries in the family. Maybe you make a meal together as a family, you have family game night. This promotes self-worth. This promotes competence. This promotes dialogue, trust, attachment. What we're providing here today is education. So psychoeducation is so important. The more we can learn about these things, that's an intervention. We're empowered. Work with providers who can teach you, provide coaching, consultation to your family. Maybe form a support group. Focus on skill development. So maybe you're a family and you're working with skills workers. Maybe you have a social worker, case manager. Finding a skills worker who can teach that child, teenager, very specific skills around time management, staying more organized, self-esteem enhancement, learning more emotional awareness, learning more self-control, trying to learn skills that can help the person stay more optimistic. The more positive skills someone can learn, in theory, that should help that person live a healthier lifestyle. Easier said than done, I know. We talked about metacognition today. How do you teach metacognition? What are strategies that are very practical? Well, coaching, modeling, teaching, role-playing, empowerment, learning about meditation, asking appropriate self-questions to that person. that can get tricky when we're talking about abstract reasoning deficits. Use visual checklist. Maybe it's working with providers who can teach these skills in multiple settings. You don't want to just teach the skill in one setting because the child, teenager can get good at learning the skill in one setting, but then can they apply it to the school bus, the playground, the job, the classroom? You need to teach it in multiple settings. This is equally important for parents and professionals listening to this, but the more we can practice self-compassion, this research has shown when we're nicer to ourselves, we are typically happier, healthier, our nervous system works better. It's a great way to bring down chronic pain in the body. It's a great way to combat anxiety and stress and shame. And there's plenty of research that also shows high levels of self-compassion. That person is way more likely to eat healthier foods. You want to enhance well-being? The research literature says eat more fruits and vegetables, amongst, of course, other things. But if you're looking at this particular slide, this is one study of many that says fruits and vegetables can enhance well-being. Why do we want to enhance well-being in all of us? Well, our bodies work better, our brains work better. It's a protective factor for our immune system. We typically live longer. We do better in work and school. So really focusing on anything we can do to enhance well-being. And I showed some things earlier, but again, think about the threats to child development that we talked about today. Now we flip that around. What are the ways we can promote early childhood development? Well, in an ideal world, again, it would have been a pregnancy free from chemicals. That child would have grown up with very positive experiences, healthy attachment patterns, playing with other kids, reading to your child. Be aware of all of these things. It's never too late to implement these. Maybe that child, the first 6 months of life, year of life, didn't have these things going on. The more you're implementing them right away, that's a very good thing. Sandra, I know we went a little over. Sorry about that. But folks, if you're seeing this again, here's my email. Reach out. Sandra, I'll stick around. Any other thoughts, questions, anything I can add to this?
This was amazing. And I do suggest to our listeners to take the time to hop on over to YouTube and go to the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel, and you will be able to see and watch this whole podcast episode and see all of Dr. Brown's visuals. His slides have so much information on them. It's definitely worth going back and watching them. And I mean, even if you're only listening, you're gaining so much information, but it's definitely worth the effort to go over there and check out those slides. And gosh, Dr. Brown, I thank you so much for, again, sharing with us. I was also writing down a bunch of notes. As you were talking, I always learn so much from you myself. I'm just really appreciate you taking the time to unpack nutrition. This week we focus on nutrition as through that lens of trauma, and then next week when you come back, we're going to be focusing on nutrition through the lens of FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So I don't have any more questions. I'm still trying to process it all. But any last words you want to say, Dr. Brown? Otherwise, I just thank you so much.
Sandra, thank you. I really appreciate you allowing me back. And I'll leave it at this. If you listen to today's episode, I think you would do really well listening to this whole series because it just builds on each other. And it'll probably be about 4 hours of content roughly once we get through this whole series. So you're going to walk away with a lot of different things to think about. So thanks again, everyone.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much, Dr. Brown.
You're welcome, my friend.
Wow, what an immense amount of information and just knowledge and wisdom from Dr. Brown. I truly hope that you got a lot out of that episode. I know I did. Just want to remind you again, we're not diagnosing here or offering medical advice, and we do highly recommend that if any of this resonates with you, make sure that you are checking with your child's doctor, nutritionist. Make sure you're, involving their team, because this is just, I find that sometimes we don't think of nutrition, or at least maybe we don't think about it so in depth when it comes to our kids and what's going on with them. I know when our youngest came, because he was so impulsive at 5 years old, and, kind of like the little Tasmanian devil going throughout the day at our house, like whirling through, and everything would be just like upheaval. We kept him way away from sugar, because that's the one thing I knew this kid, like, do not give him any sugar. We won't be able to handle that. So that's probably the reason why he likes the avocados and the cucumbers and all those things I mentioned earlier. But he does enjoy sugar too. But I didn't really at that time understand the depth of what we need to know about when it comes to nutrition, and the why, behind, some of the things with our kids, and then how nutrition can play a role in that, and how it can even turn things around. I'm so grateful again for Dr. Brown, just sharing his wealth of information with us. If it resonated with you, please make sure you continue to stay tuned throughout the month of January. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Brown every week, and on this topic of nutrition. And next week it will be, when it comes to fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So if you have a kiddo that you're parenting that you suspect maybe was prenatally exposed to alcohol or even other substances, whether they're diagnosed or not, I'm sure that you will get a lot out of that episode. I'm looking forward to that. So, and again, make sure you're checking out our YouTube channel to be able to check out the slides so that you can see those. So excited about having him back next week. Don't forget that you can register to win a free signed copy of my new book, Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms. In the show notes for this episode, if you go there, you will see a link that you can click on where you can enter to win a free copy. And at the end of January, when we're all done with our episodes with Dr. Brown, we will pick 2 names and announce the winners. So make sure that you enter to win that book. And again, as a mom like you, of children who have come from hard places with trauma histories and all of these things that we were just talking about, it is so important, even as Dr. Brown mentioned, that we learn as parents and caregivers, and we get educated. And that's one of the things we do for you here as well. I offer online and in-person training on FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Every month I offer a free 1-hour interactive. It's not a recording. It's live. You can ask questions at the end, but it's called an Intro to FASD. So every month I offer one of those at different time slots. And then I also do, more in-depth, 3-hour session. And then we're also going to be offering, starting the end of February, or the end of January, I think it starts February 19th, is a 5 3-hour sessions where I use the Facets neurobehavioral model, and we unpack that and learn about the effects that alcohol does have on a developing baby, all of the symptoms, and just really take an in-depth approach on learning how to apply accommodations. So it's excellent. It's the most in-depth session that I do. So that will be coming up. You will not want to miss signing up for that if you suspect FASD at all in your home. And make sure that you check out all of our episodes of the podcast, of course, and tell your fellow adoptive and foster family friends about this podcast. Don't forget the Hope for the FASD Journey online support community. We have parents from across the country who join us the first 3 Tuesday nights of every month, where we're just able to come together, share our struggles with parenting kids with FASD, learn from each other, pray for one another. It is such a vital part of my parenting journey. We just really are such a family, all in it together. So if you're looking for that kind of community, you want to check that out. Everything is found on our website, justicefororphansny.org. Just click the button that says Adoption and Foster Care Journey, and you'll have access to all of the stuff. And again, I am so grateful that you took the time to listen to this episode today. Hopefully you'll listen throughout the whole month of January to learn all you can from Dr. Jerrod Brown. But I am grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today, and I'm thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.